Welcome to the debate. When you look at a pint of strawberries in the grocery store, you might, just see a simple piece of fruit. But beneath that plastic is a highly sensitive economic mechanism, one we are actively testing right now.
Right, yeah, and it looks perfectly orderly until you pull one thread, say removing a specific segment of the labor force. And suddenly the whole system reacts in ways that, completely defy basic intuition.
Exactly. We're looking at the economic reality of mass deportations today, drawing directly on empirical data from the 2025 Oxnard ICE raids and the 2008 to 2014 Secure Communities program.
Yeah.
And I look at this data and I see a story of acute, immediate supply collapse, like the sheer physical shock of losing the workforce that actually produces our goods.
Sure, but looking at that exact same data, I see a much more insidious macroeconomic threat. Namely, the indirect destruction of native-born U.S. citizen jobs.
Okay, well, let's start with that physical shock, because the sheer scale of the 2025 ICE raids in Oxnard is honestly, it's staggering.
It really is.
Right? When enforcement suddenly intensified, the local agricultural workforce dropped by 20 to 40%, almost overnight. That isn't a slow economic shift. That is crops literally rotting in the dirt.
Right. Ventura County alone saw what? Up to 70% of its strawberries left unharvested?
Yeah, exactly. Up to 70%. And California supplies 75% of all U.S. fruits and nuts. When you wipe out the labor required to harvest that, you get a $3 to $7 billion crop loss.
Which is a massive localized hit, absolutely.
Well, the mechanism is simple, though. Fewer strawberries harvested means less supply, which immediately triggers a 5 to 12% price spike at grocery stores nationwide. To me, that immediate starvation of our foundational supply chain, that macro-level inflation, is the primary crisis.
The agricultural shock is highly visible, I'll give you that. I mean, you can literally film rotting strawberries. But the true crisis is the systemic spillover into the broader labor market.
Okay, how so?
Well, if you look at the Secure Communities program data from 2008 to 2014, you find something that sounds, entirely backwards. Deportations actually decreased the employment rate of U.S. citizens by 0.71%.
Wait, what? How does removing undocumented workers result in fewer jobs for citizens? The common intuition is exactly the opposite of that.
Right. It comes down to a concept called labor complementarities. Undocumented workers and native-born workers generally don't compete for the exact same jobs. They act as complements to each other.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. When you remove the foundational labor, you directly eliminate the middle-skilled citizen jobs that exist to coordinate or support that labor. Think about a residential construction site.
Right. So if the framing crew, which might be largely undocumented, just disappears.
Exactly. If the framing crew disappears, the concrete doesn't get poured. The drywall doesn't get installed. Suddenly, the native-born construction manager has no crew to supervise.
And they lose their job.
Precisely. The project stalls, which means the local hardware store loses a massive commercial account, forcing them to lay off retail staff. The structural hollowing out happens from the inside.
I hear the logic in the construction example, but does that indirect downstream effect really eclipse the massive upfront hit to our food supply? I mean, undocumented workers are highly concentrated in agriculture.
That's true, but...
Right. So if a restaurant can't afford to buy produce because of a 12% price spike, the managerial jobs there disappear anyway due to the supply shock, not just the loss of complementarities. Basic labor is the engine block of the supply chain.
I get that. But they aren't just in agriculture. Undocumented immigrants make up roughly 5% of the total U.S. labor force across highly varied sectors: maids, cooks, logistics, construction. And there is another mechanism we can't ignore, which is the chilling effect.
You mean the drop in consumer spending?
Right, and it's severe. When enforcement ramps up, undocumented workers who remain stop spending money in their communities out of fear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they don't go to restaurants, they don't buy clothes, they don't hire local services. That instantly crushes local consumer demand. It bankrupts neighborhood businesses and compounds those citizen job losses well beyond just the farm or construction managers.
So your argument is that citizens who thought they were entirely insulated from immigration enforcement are actually collateral
damage because the local spending and the foundational labor just vanish simultaneously.
Exactly. The economy is a deeply interconnected web, not a series of isolated buckets.
It's a fascinating tension. On one side, you have the mechanism of damage as a blunt force trauma to supply, crops left in the field and immediate double-digit price spikes for consumers.
Yeah.
And on the other, it's the structural erosion of native-born employment and local consumer demand.
But the one thing both datasets absolutely shut down, though, is the myth of simple one-to-one job replacement. Both Oxnard and Secure Communities conclusively show that native-born workers do not simply step in to take the jobs vacated by deported workers.
The vacuum just stays empty.
Well, there was clearly a lot more to explore in the empirical data regarding these economic mechanisms.
Definitely.
It really challenges our assumptions about how labor markets actually function.
It really does.
So, the next time you pick up that pint of strawberries, you're not just looking at fruit. You're looking at the delicate balance of an entire workforce.
And wondering what happens when you pull that thread.